Boo. Cool. So this is numero 3, and I thought I kind of don't really like try to think about what I want to do beforehand, and I just sort of see what things that come up. And something that came up for me, chatting to you guys and hanging out, has been something maybe specific with Sham, and that Sham's a very fluid place. People come and going, and people here are at a lot of different stages of their life. So I wanted to cover something that I saw that I thought was quite a useful framework for understanding where you are and what you want to do. So we'll discuss James Marcia's identity status theory. Pretty complicated, but it's pretty straightforward. It's pretty old. It's like from the late 60s. And basically, it's it's linked to adolescence. And he basically did a whole bunch of surveys chatting to kids about where they saw themselves in the world, and he made a framework. He basically mapped it in 2 variables, and one was crisis and one was commitment. So he thought before this it was all about commitment, how much you committed to what you want to do in life and whatnot. And they'll say, oh, okay, when you're 16 you're kind of committed, and then you're committed when you're 20. And so crisis here is not like a bad thing. Crisis is just where you're trying a whole lot of different stuff. They also, I think I put up, but it's basically also exploration. So it's trying a lot of different things. It's not a problematic state by no means. And then commitment is pretty much making any kind of commitment for your future self. So things in life, there are some things in life where you need to make commitments. You take it, bachelor degree, or you take a new career, or you come to Sham for the winter. Like, these are all commitments on your future self. So it's where you are in this matrix. And basically it's a good way to feel, to understand what's going on. And it's applicable to occupation, hobbies, sexual preference, and where to live, which is something that's sort of plagued me. I've had it at least for about a year, 2 years. Like, do I go back? Before I was living in Denmark. Do I go back to Denmark to live? Do I live here in Sham and do this? Do I go back to Australia and live? Or do I find a 4th place? So there's a lot of big questions where you can use this to understand where you are and see what's going on. So basically he's like just split up. It's pretty simple. Like low, high, low, high. So for low crisis exploration, low commitment, it's a stage called diffusion. So basically you're not really exploring different options, but at the same time you haven't really committed to any options. So all of your energy in a way is just diffuse. Maybe I don't even know if this would count if you're the type of person that starts a lot of projects but they don't really go anywhere. This might include that, but it might not, because you are kind of starting them. But basically there's no real avenue for you to build any kind of expertise or build any kind of knowledge or whatever you want to do in which area of your life. So that gets a downward smiley face, because that's not a great state to be in. The next space on low commitment, so these are not committing yourself too much, is moratorium. So you're doing a lot of exploration, you're in a high state of crisis, you're trying a lot of new different things, but you're not committing. So I had a really fun time in Italy cycling a friend's bike, and I was like, this is a cool sport, I'd like to get into it, but I don't really want to spend 2,000 euros on a new road bike. So I bought a 70 euro bike. So it's low commitment, but I'm exploring different sports. So that's in a way moratorium. And a moratorium doesn't sound like a great word, but it is a fine state to be in, because you don't really know yet what you want to commit to. The next state is foreclosure. So you've committed high to something, you've fucking gone all in, but you really haven't done any crisis, you've gone through any crisis for that to happen, or you haven't really explored any options. So foreclosure would be, it's hard to judge from the outside, but it'd be someone who, some older adults that I've known, and they got a whole family, wife and kids, all great. They get to 55, 60, the kids leave home, and then boom, you find out they're actually not even heterosexual, they're just homosexual. And then they just divorce a wife, find a young boyfriend, and that's their life. And basically, you would imagine that they probably foreclosed on their sexual preferences before they really knew what was there. This can happen in a whole bunch of ways, but foreclosure is obviously not the great place to be, also because you're highly committed. In terms of being in foreclosure, maybe, you could also say that foreclosure is kind of like ignorance is bliss. So those people that are in foreclosure, they can't, because they haven't been through crisis, they don't see other worlds or see other of their own identities. So maybe it's fine to be in, but it can lead to, if that really isn't a you, that is really you, and that's a life you don't want to live, eventually you'll break out. And because you've committed so high, you've made a family or you've moved to a country or whatever, you've done this stuff, which has commitments to you and financial or personal commitments, it's going to be kind of shit. It's going to be painful. And then the other one here is achievement. And achievement is not an end state, because there's no real end states in psychology, but basically it's where you've done a lot of exploration and crisis, and then you've committed. You've been like, I've tried these different things, I've seen worn these different hats, tried these different identities or occupations or hobbies or different places to live, and I've decided on one, boom, I commit. So basically, ideally, what you want to do is you want to go from moratorium, because you're young, you don't know what's going on, you don't know what you're into, to achievement. And then they find that people don't really stay in achievement like they used to, right? No one has a career in the same career for 40 years. So then you go back into moratorium, and then you go back into achievement. So it's a really nice framework to know where you're at in your life and where you're going. And of course, when you're in moratorium, you don't want to slip either into diffusion, and you don't want to go from diffusion and just go straight into foreclosure. That's something that happens often, I find, if people are in diffusion and they're like, I can't be, for some reason there's not enough willpower to try different things, but then again, they're also not committing themselves in their lives, and they just pick one thing out of all the things in the world, one thing, and they're like, I'm gonna fucking do it. And it's like, why? Like you haven't even started to there's so many things out there. Why this one thing from out of all the stuff that you could have done or decided to spend your time on? Super, super useful for this valley, because I feel that mainly people come here in moratorium, right? Like they don't want to take a full-time job, or it's whatever they'll do. Like, I'll just do a winter, and the winter starts there's another winter, and then it's winter, summer, winter, and then it's am I hitting home? And then moratorium kind of in a way turns into diffusion, because something that was meant to be, it started out I'm going to push my boundaries and see the world, ends up being diffusion, because you stop exploring, right? You're in sham, you live in sham life, but you haven't really committed. So this would only be to people that maybe haven't learned French, myself included. But there are people that live here for 10, 15, 20 years and haven't committed in those ways. And so you sort of fall into moratorium. But to be honest, a lot of people here have also moved for achievement. So I know a lot of high-end alpine climbers, rock climbers, they're okay, sham is the mecca. Even Americans come over here and they're okay, fuck it, committing, moving to sham. I've explored the world, and this is the best way I can do my sport and live my life, and and they move here and they come in achievement, and that's great. And maybe they stay here in achievement, and then either they move back into moratorium if they get tired of that, or they just stay here. So the question is he which stage is he in?
Achievement.
Fucking going for it. For me, the reason why I brought this up is not because it's funny, and it is funny, but I was, at least when I was in university going, the way that we go clubbing, we go out to the city, do some pre-drinking, go to a club about midnight, be there until 4 or 5, and then go out to Macca's. And Macca's, that was where you saw everyone from the same club, and clubs, you talk about your night, blah, blah, blah. And I was in the line, and this guy got his order before me, and I was telling him, I was going to do exchange in Denmark, and everyone's wasted. And he's got this Big Mac, and he's fucking mate, why would you go anywhere when you got fucking gold right here? And starts smashing his Big Mac right in front of me. And I was maybe it's gold, and maybe it's really good, but I don't know that. I don't know that until I live elsewhere, and then I can be like, nah, it's pretty fucking sweet here. All right, now we're doing second stage. But the book is Addicted to Love by Jan Goetz, and we've been covering sections of it. So the first one we did like layers of identity. Second one we covered disassociation and merging, which actually I think maybe diffusion, for those that were here for number 2, diffusion is linked to disassociation, and foreclosure is linked to merging. Yeah, does that make sense? So yeah, so if you foreclose and you've married your first sweetheart and you become a wife and a mother and you've probably foreclosed and you've also merged with that decision so much that you can't see outside of it. And then disassociation is that you're probably like have a lot of interests and desires, but because you're scared of actually doing it, you've probably like rejected them all or not let yourself experiment and explore. And so you're probably disassociated with all those desires and therefore diffuse in how you are. People that weren't here for number 2, that wouldn't make any sense. But basically, really short, disassociation is where you have a natural desire and you take the opposite tact. So similar to the first one, it's like you're like kind of creative, but then you're like, oh no, I don't want to seem creative, so you're like not creative. And then merging is where you merge with that. So you're like, oh, I'm kind of creative, and I want people to see me as creative, so I'm like this super artsy type thing. Cool. So it's actually nice that we get to start linking the different psychological frameworks because they're all describing the same fucking animals. Cool. So we're gonna do needs and abundance consciousness. All right. Cakes are good. Lots of cakes. All right. So is this needs or abundance?
Abundance.
But I need the cake. No, you're right. This is a bit of abundance. So that's and then what do we have here? So this is needs consciousness. So needs consciousness. So this is like another chapter 2 after we spoke about before. But basically, Jan reckons it comes from this negative self-belief, where you're trying to always prove your self-worth. So it's basically a consciousness, which is basically the organization of what you're thinking at the moment. So you're thinking, what do I need? What do I need? What do I need?
So is that like related, or does it stem from the trauma that he was talking about last time, or is that supposed to be separate?
It can be. I mean, in theory, the negative self-belief, he posits that it comes from trauma.
Okay.
But I don't think it necessarily comes from trauma.
Okay.
I mean, you can have a negative self-belief just because you don't know what's there. Like, if you have a desire for something, you don't, like, if you're like, oh, climbing could be nice, but you don't know if you're a good climber or a bad climber.
Mm.
So maybe half of the people think they're an awesome climber, and they're just, like, dickheads that, like, spray bead at everyone. Or half the people be like, oh, I don't know what I am, so maybe I'm kind of shit.
Okay.
And I need people to help me, in a way. But once you have a negative self-belief, once you have a belief about yourself that that you're not good at something, that you're valueless, then you start to plug that hole, right? So your needs are going to be thing of your identity, and basically he links it to a fear of looking at yourself. So you're always looking out because you're scared to look inside, because when you look inside, you already think that there's nothing there. You already think that you have no value, and that's negative. It's bullshit. Just because if you look inside, you have something. There's always something there, right? Like in no way are you worthless. Like you might not be worth as much as other people or different people. Like everyone's on the bell curve. But you're not. But you're not. There's nothing like you're not like nothing, right? There's always something there. Basically, it leads to external validation because that's what the manifestation of it is. So whenever people are doing stuff to get some kind of validation or self-surety, they do that. And basically, when you think about the experience of it, it's like, say you made something or did something, that validation is really you not trusting your own gut feeling. So you make some cake, you're like, oh, it's a pretty cool cake, but I don't know if it's good enough. I'll ask a lot of people if it's a good cake, or I'll post it, and they'll be like, oh, it's cool, and then okay, it gets 100 likes, then that means it's a good cake, because you've stopped trusting yourself to be like, oh no, I made an effort here. It's not the best effort, we're not perfect. And I think, and it goes to your point as well, and I think this is something to do with that there's parts of our brain that are quite perfectionists, and so it's scared to see that we don't measure up to that perfection. And that fear of not being perfect leads to all these, this kind of fear for looking at yourself and not trusting our own judgment. And it's super easy to see in other people. I'm sure we've seen a lot of people here or know people that just go after this validation from others. But when you're in it, it's really hard because you're obviously merged with those needs. So you're like, oh, but I really need this thing, and all you focus in on is the thing, or the addiction, or whatever what it is, and you can't see outside that. You can't see where that need arises from. And there's another term as well called extrinsically motivated. So it's you do something for extrinsic, so rewards that are outside the action. So I mean, you also work for, a lot of people work for extrinsic rewards like money, and that's fine, that's not really part of their value or whatnot. But a lot of people, maybe agree with Stu here, or other people working in large companies, but they find that their salary is like a reflection of their worth for the company. So there's been a lot of teams that have fucking been broken up because people have, talk about each other's salary and how much they do on the team, and there's all this mystery and cloaks and daggers when it comes to that. I'll give you an example of somewhere where I've been in the needs consciousness recently, and I have Iris's permission to post this. But basically, I had a nice night out, and I was sleeping, but I couldn't really sleep, and she was working. So she was like, "Fuck off, Carlo." But
hey, Carlo, sorry, which are you? The white box?
I'm green. I'm green here. Yeah. And so I'm talking to Iris, a good friend of mine. She's not here. Unfortunately, she couldn't make it.
Good friend.
when I asked her who could say it, she was like, "Carlo, make sure people know that it's as a friend." I'm like, I think people would read it, but just in case, I wrote good friend, so there's context if you don't know her. She's a good friend of mine. Anyway, but I love this here where I go I'd love if you're around some fucking bullshit dickhead, blah blah, and then it's pretty obvious, and then I became aware of the consciousness. So this is where we talk about, so your consciousness is what you're thinking, what your mindset is, where you're going, right? And awareness is to be aware of that. So my consciousness was needy. I was oh man, I can't sleep. Morning, then I need to hang out with someone. I just need someone there. I couldn't quite figure it out. But within half an hour, I was okay, no, I'm aware. I have feelings that I need things. That's fine, right? It's all about self-acceptance. The book. So I shouldn't hammer myself about needing to be around people, because obviously I've gone from places where there's a lot of people and music and stuff, and I've gone back to my place where there's no one. So that's really hard to handle. That's fine, but I got a lot of needs, but I'm aware of it, and I'm not going to feel those needs with other people. And so it's just about being aware of the consciousness that you're in, and when you're more aware of it, it helps it dissipate, because you're aware of the needs, right? You're aware that there's some crying toddler in you that needs people. I need to be with people, blah blah blah, and you can zoom up a level, and you don't have to merge. Your identity doesn't have to merge with those needs. Just because you have feelings and emotions doesn't mean you are those feelings and emotions. And so you're above it, and then they're there, and you're fuck you, Carlo, just sleep, just lie down, relax. Cool. Let's go to abundance consciousness. So, abundance consciousness is an expression from your natural state. So the natural state was the one which is all a la naturale. Basically, you're going to focus on what you have in abundance. So, love, friendship, desires, who you are. Enjoy baking weed brownies.
You're fucking good to them.
I have to cut that out. Yeah. And so, a lot of times when I go to parties, I bring when I have them, a lot of them, I bring them to parties and I give them to people, because when I'm giving to them to people, I get in the abundance consciousness. I feel I'm giving, and all this energy is going out, and of course it comes back, but it doesn't have to come back. It's from me to people. This here, me, myself here, this what I do here in these presentations, in this series, this is me this is a way to get me into my abundance consciousness. I listen to a lot of podcasts, I read a lot about psychology, and I love it, but I want to share it, and that's a natural desire. And so, I come up here and talk, and it's super nice because I get to feel, because I have an abundance, whether there's 3 of you or 10 of you or 50 of you, it's the same giving. And so I get to get into that consciousness. And basically it's abundant, so you don't lose any of it, and you're doing it for the love of doing it, and of course it's intrinsically motivated, so it's just coming from within you. There is also someone here that I have an abundance consciousness relationship with, and that's Ryan Cameron. So me and Ryan Cameron, we like, you know, sort of minimal house techno, you'd say. So
Fucking great music, just call it that.
yeah, it's great music. And so like he'll just send me tracks, and I don't think I send you as much tracks sometimes.
No,
but not as much. And you don't need anything back from us, right?
No.
So we just give. You just give. It's abundant. And the thing is, it's abundant. So when we listen to these tracks, that doesn't change or reduce your ability to listen to track. It's not like you go to YouTube and it's like, oh, the track's played out. Like you're literally giving, and this is what I kind of like about the digital age, because we're getting to a point where a lot of our goods and services are becoming abundant. They're just digital, they're just data. But we derive so much value from these tracks and derive value from the sharing of it. Now we're going to talk about this woman. Does anyone know who that is? No? Cool. We're going to do an exercise now in sympathy. But before that, we're going to talk about her. And the segue to her, so let's talk about her quickly, and then we'll do the exercise. Cool. So she is, look, text as well. So she was, I think she was born in America, but then came to France for a bit. So she was mainly a nanny and carer for the primary thing of her career. That was her shtick. She went on a trip around the world. She had to sell the farm to get that. People described her as like, Mary Poppins. She was like a feminist, really strong, always spoke her mind. She didn't have a husband or whatnot, have a family. And then in 2007, she, 2 years before she passed away, and she had she had a lot of shit with her. She had like a lot of storage stuff. Amy, so you do a bit of au pair work, right?
Yeah.
So, and she made a career out of it. So could you imagine why? So I'm assuming you lived for like 80 to 100 years. So in like, could you think of a reason why in like 2070, some like dude in some house with a weird haircut will be talking about you if you stayed in your profession, just became au pair the rest of your life?
No.
Pretty weird, huh?
Yeah.
Pretty weird. So why am I talking about her? I should just end it there. There's no more. Done. In that box that they found in her collection of stuff that she had, they found 150,000 negatives. Do you guys know what negatives are? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so when you take a photo, you have the photo reel, right? And they're called the negatives. So they're because they've gotten the light, they're negative. So all the white here will be black, and all the black will be white. They're negative. And then from that, then you produce actual photos. So because they were negative, they were never ever produced as a photo. They're just like you just sort of looked at them in a thing. 3,000 prints. So then 3,000 she got printed. Before that, does anyone know how much a negative cost back in? It was mainly in the 50s and the 60s.
3 shillings.
Yeah.
$30,000.
What does that even mean? So I don't actually know.
Sorry.
So I'm just getting you a guess. I don't know, but maybe it's a lot, maybe it's a little.
1,000 work hours a year, right?
Yeah. Keep on going. But I don't know. I don't actually know. That was just like a guessing. What we can say from her life is her motivations were definitely intrinsic, because she didn't show any of her photos to anyone. Alright? She didn't even get them fucking made into photos. She didn't try to go to dealers. And then before she died, people just bought them at auction and found all these fucking crates of shit, right? Of stuff. She left a body of work which a lot of people think is pretty much the greatest body of work of street photography for the latter half of that century, of the 20th century. So it's so important to think about like the human experience of the artist, and because they see the world completely different, right? They only see it, they want to pursue their passion. She wants to take photographs, and she doesn't really give a butt fuck where it ends up. And so we see her, we see this image, and we create an identity around that and around all of her photos that we're going to see, but she never made them for us to see them. But you're right in that it's a spectrum. Like, sure, you do things because you love them, but it's nice when people appreciate them as well. But that's after. The motivation is before the act, and the act takes place, and then you have everything happening after the act. And this is where social media is like, I think they invented it for everything after the fact, after the act. So, you went to a party, took photos, you upload the photos, people like the photos, but then it's sort of gotten that people, now it motivates people to have parties, to take photos, to like the photos, to get that. So now we're going to do an exercise. Maybe I had a bit of wine, so I'm feeling pretty good. I just want to say before this that when I was like putting this together, I was doing a lot of crying, and I don't know if we'll get there, and I don't think I'll get there. But empathy is a really good and super nice feeling to have, to feel for other people and what's going on, to put yourself in their shoes. And so when I want you to see these photos, I want you to think about, if they're old, I want you to think about the life that they had. If they're young, I want you to think about the life that they're going to have. I want you to look at their face, how they react. I want you to look at what they're holding. I want you to look at where they're standing. I want you to think about that person and who they were in that moment, everything that got to that moment, and then further on. And I want you to create a story about them. Now they're going to be side by side, but I don't want you to compare them. I just did that because the way that she shot was all portraits. So so we'll go through and look at her photos and feel what she saw, and feel these people that she's captured.